G'day, g'day, wherever you are in this wonderful multiverse of ours. Welcome to Mastering Music, Mastering Live. Tony Jack the Bear Man's in the house and in full effect. Coming to you from my beautiful studios, Deluxe Mastering, Melbourne, Australia. And after several attempts and after trying to get this off the ground, I think finally I can say that I am so happy to be able to introduce to you a gentleman who I've known for almost 20 years now. I think I'll go back with this gentleman. He is an absolute legend in the hip-hop world. He is a producer. He is a mixing engineer. He has reinvented himself, which we'll talk about that very soon. He has worked with the likes of De La Soul. He's worked also with Redman, who's currently working on his album right now, Method Man, Ed Sermon.
Eric Sermon.
Eric Sermon. Thank you for correcting me. Eric Sermon. Our very own 1200 Techniques here in Australia, which is where I had the pleasure of meeting him. He's in America right now. You're in New York at the moment, or in Connecticut?
I am in Connecticut.
So from Connecticut, may I present my dear friend and legend, Troy Hightower. G'day, mate.
Hey, good day. Good day, mate. How you doing?
I'm doing remarkably well. Thank you very much for asking. And
yes, it took us a few days, but
we got there, man.
Here. It's running. My wife is cooking. It smells nice in the house.
What's she got going on?
I don't know. Whatever she cooks is good. But anyway.
Yeah. There's something about wives, man, that cook good. Anyway, we're not here to talk about wives. We can talk about cooking later. Because actually,
okay.
I got to ask you a question about soul food. So just remind me.
Soul food.
Soul food. Okay. Yeah. So I want to get the lowdown on soul food. So anyway, Troy, thank you for joining on the podcast. This has been something we've been trying to plan for a very long time, and I particularly wanted to have you on because you got a great story in how you entered into the business and your success in the business, and there's some great takeaways I think for a lot of youngsters who would be checking us out, whether it's on the YouTube or on the other audio platforms, because your story, like mine, it hasn't been very typical. Just the way you've come into the industry, the way you've learnt your craft, it hasn't been typical of what many of our contemporaries and peers would have had to go through back in the day, as it were, sort of 80s and early 90s. So Troy, tell us, how did it all begin for you? Where did it all start? And tell us about growing up. Were you always into music as a kid? Was it something that came later in life? Just what made Troy Hightower want to sort of get into music and become a mixing engineer?
Well, Jack. Well, a long time ago. No, I'm only playing. Got into music. Well, I mean, as most kids with parents, they want you to stay out of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So you pick up an instrument when you're in elementary school, and that's really where it all started. I have a family of musicians. My grandmother, rest her soul, played piano. My mom played classical piano.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, music has always been part of my life. Listening to records, mother played records all the time. I mean, that was back when AM radio played just about everything. There were no genres. There wasn't like the hip hop station. It wasn't the classical station. It wasn't the rock station. ABC band played it all.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. Indeed, this is true. Yep. Same with me. So when it came to getting into the studio game, what was there a moment where you said, you know what, I want to start making records, or was there some kind of natural progression that went from being, because you DJ like me, you used to DJ parties as a teenager, collect records, study the records, look at the credits.
Right.
Yeah?
Well, I mean, for me, let's see, it started listening to like the local radio station, and they had mix shows. For me, it started with listening to those mix shows, recording those mix shows on cassettes.
Yeah.
And trying to emulate what I heard on cassette, like buying the records that they actually were blending together, and buying those records and trying to do it myself. So that's really where it happened. My mom ended up getting me one turntable one year with a mixer, and said, and of course they had to be Technique. So Back then they were like $1,000. So I got one turntable 1 year, and then after I got into boarding school, as it were, the next year my mom got me 2 turntables, 2 Techniques, and a Newmark mixer, and that's where it all started for me back in boarding school, high school.
Yeah. You called it boarding school. Were you actually living there, like boarding school, or is that
Yes,
just the...
I was actually living there in Vermont, in
Okay.
Vermont, and that's kind of where it started for me.
So what got you to Vermont? Was it a bit like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where he got in the trouble in Philly and he's got sent down to California, or was it that kind of situation?
Well, no. I mean, as you know, back in that time when I was younger, the Bronx was a very okay place to live. Wasn't really, safe or whatever you want to call it. And in order for me to stay out of trouble, I went to boarding school for the last 2 years of high school.
Mm-hmm. How's that experience for
So
you?
that experience was pretty good. I mean, went to Vermont, out in the woods, met a lot of different people, rode horses, snowmobiles.
Nice.
Let's see. They used to cultivate. They had a lot of maple trees, so of course
Maple
we're in
syrup.
Vermont, maple syrup.
Oh yeah.
So yes, so that's really how the experience was, and then I graduated from there.
And then you went to college, graduated there.
Yes, I graduated there, and then I went to college. I went to Johnson and Wales College, where I met my wife of 37 years. That's cooking some nice food. I know you don't want to hear that, but it smells very nice in here.
No. Listen, I love food. I love food as much as anything else, my friend. So we'll get to that.
Yeah. So
what did you graduate? What did you graduate in, or with?
What did I graduate with when I went to Johnson and Wales? Well, I, believe it or not, went to school for culinary arts. Because my last year of boarding school, I worked in the kitchen. Like the last couple of years, I worked in the kitchen, and that was another way to stay out of trouble too.
Yeah.
So, as a high schooler, well, I normally the thing that you do when you go to college is something that you've done before, because we all want to feel comfortable when we get into another situation. So I ended up going to culinary school because that was the last thing that I knew how to do, and I had some experience.
Right. And then from there, what happened?
From there, I mean, I was actually working as I took that DJ knowledge from my high school days, like trying to learn and blend records together. I ended up working in local nightclubs, doing weddings, and so on.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
So at what point? So how old were you? At what point did you make the decision? You know what? I want to learn more than just spinning records and entertaining people. I want to actually learn how to do this shit.
Well, you saying how old? Damn, Jack. Let's see here.
Well, I remember my moment. I can tell you now. I was 15. When listening to records, I was so fascinated, and I was so enamored by it all. And I said, I have to find out how this stuff is created. And I was 15 at the time, and that's
right.
And that's when I knew I'm going to go down. Well, it was the music industry, and it was record production, mixing, because that's all I knew. Because mastering was something that found me later on. So, did you have a moment like that? I mean, there must have been a time when you just, because I don't believe it was just dumb luck. You just didn't wake up one day and someone came up to you and said, "Hey, Troy, do you want an internship?" Like, there must have been something.
No.
Yeah, there must have been a catalyst somewhere.
Well, I mean, again, while I was in college, I was, like I told you, I was also working in nightclubs.
Yeah.
So that meant, in order for you to be current, you had to get all the latest records.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of records, Jack.
Oh yeah.
And and I still have those records in storage.
Awesome.
And once I saw, I had a room. I had one of the walls in this room dedicated to vinyl.
Nice.
And there came a point where I got in these nightclubs. I was sick of carrying around crates of records because these kids now, all they do is like carry around a hard drive and they have thousands of records.
Yeah.
We had to lug around crates.
We did indeed.
Upstairs, downstairs, everywhere. So after getting sick of that, and then also CDs started to come into play at that point. I said to myself, I don't feel like carrying around these records anymore. I want to start music production. So that's really when it happened, probably in my, I want to say, sophomore year, when I moved off campus into a place and I could actually carry all my stuff and have all my stuff there. So I'm trying to think around what age. Let me see, 18. Say around 15, 16.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, my daughter just went to college. She's 18. It had to be around 18, Jack.
Yeah. So
Let's say like 17, 18. That's when I said to myself, I'm sick of carrying around records. I actually want to focus on production.
So you started banging on doors in studios and trying to get yourself in there that time too?
Well, at that point when I was in college, I was still, like I told you, like working at clubs. And after I graduated from college and came back to New York is when, I went further with my career.
And how'd you do that?
Oh, how did I do that? Let's see. Jack. I ended up living in my grandmother's basement, getting equipment. And at that point, I got an internship at the Apollo recording studio, which was above the theater. So I got a job there as an intern, and I had the bright idea to see if I can get another job as an intern somewhere. So after working there and learning some things there, I also tried to get a job at a studio in Long Island, and that was the Music Palace, and that was where Public Enemy was working at the time, and I had a chance to be an intern there.
Awesome.
So,
go on.
Yeah. So that was basically the start. It's been so long ago, Jack, and I'm trying to think about all these things here. But yeah, the Music Palace and then also the Apollo Theater got me started as far as being an intern.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. I appreciate how sometimes when you've had a long career, going back 30 years or so, I find it difficult myself to remember. Even what I last week sometimes can be sketchy for me when it comes to recalling stuff. But one of the things I found interesting about you, and this is an era that we were fairly similar. I never really had an internship proper, but I just got to swarm around all these different studios and stick my head in and establish relationships. And it was very different to what my peers were doing. Most of them the model was, you got a job, and you got an internship, you stayed there for a long period of time, you paid your dues, and maybe you went up the hierarchy, or perhaps you went off and freelance. But you, back in those days also, you worked at lots of different studios. So you got to learn from lots of different people and discover different ways of doing things, and probably, dare I say, have a more versatile toolkit in terms of how to approach things and how to handle people and clients and run sessions, and sort of have more options and more ways of doing it, to pick and choose to create your own style of doing things, as opposed to almost becoming, some people, if they work under someone for a long time, that can almost become a derivative of that person, picking up the good and the bad traits. Whereas I found that by looking at lots of different people, working with lots of different people, different studios, you got to cherry pick the stuff that appealed to you, and you could create your own way of working.
Well, a lot of me having to create my own way of working, led me to to do sessions at the Apollo with an engineer. His name was Ali Cotton, and staying after the session because, at 12 o'clock, there was not ever another studio session. So I would say after and like learn the gear, and that was really like where it actually started for me. So that's how I learned my own way of mixing, we'll say, by actually teaching myself all the gear in the studio.
Was there any engineers or producers at the time that influenced you mainly, or those people's work that you particularly gravitated towards or tried to emulate from a starting point of view?
Well, I mean, at the time we're talking, who was out at the time? Let's say Tribe Called Quest was big, De La Soul. I mean, all of the native tongues basically, and the persons whose name kept popping up was Bob Powers.
Yeah.
So Bob Powers, as an engineer mixing all that early stuff, I used to say to myself, since he's doing these groups that I like, I've got to be better than him.
Yeah.
So he was my benchmark.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever get to meet the man and hang out with him or anything like that?
Nah, yes, I did get to meet him like later on after I, finished mixing other songs, and I did meet him. I met him through De La Soul, through Paz from De La Soul. So I did meet him, and told him I was his biggest fan, and that was back a long time ago, and so yeah, I did.
How was he?
We didn't hang out too much, but
was he cool? Was it good to hang out with?
you said, how was he? Was he cool?
Was it cool to hang out with? Yeah. How was that experience?
Yeah, he was definitely cool. I mean, he was a nice guy. I mean, he wasn't hung up on, hey, I'm Bob Powers. I don't have time to talk to you. I mean, he was down to earth person.
Yeah, I think one of the things that never ceased to amaze me as a young kid growing up, and getting to meet the people who I admired and respected, they were all so nice. Even all of them had their own different personality traits, but they were all so forthcoming and willing to help and open, and it was so profound. That affected me so profoundly, Troy, because I felt that this is apart from the fact that these guys had great chops and skills and reputations and whatnot, they were just so down to earth and so unassuming, and didn't understood their characters, who they were, and reputation was just a perception of who they were. And meeting them, they were just so open and willing to help, and I was just inspired me to say that one day if I ever got to a position like them, I'd do the same thing, which is what I'm doing today. And so it's always lovely when you meet the people who you respect, admire, have this thing about them, and then they actually turn out being really great people. And I think it's important for us guys as well, as now that we're more experienced, that when people approach us, that we remember that we were once like them, and we're able to offer them some guidance and a kind word and some encouragement. So long as it's sincere, we're not pissing in their pocket. But
very true.
Yeah, I always love to hear stories like that from people who meet their, for lack of a better word, idols, and they end up being good experiences. So yeah, man. So you were learning your craft. So where did your first break happen, if you will? I mean, because Onyx was the record that put you on the map. So
definitely, my first break was after recession at the Apollo.
Mm-hmm.
Engineer had already mixed. We've been there for 12 hours at least. He had already mixed that, and there was another session coming in at midnight. The hours that I used to hang out after the session to learn my craft. So somebody was coming in at midnight. The engineer was like, "Hey, I'm tired. Would you like to do this?" And then, of course, scared at first.
Absolutely.
Didn't know who Onyx was. and they were from one of the labels that he was working with, Def Jam. So I bit the bullet and said, yes, I'll do it. The people started coming up, and the two people that I walked in the door that actually changed my whole career, one of them was Jam Master Jay,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was Run,
Mm-hmm.
from the group Run DMC.
That's a pretty ominous sign right there, isn't it?
Yeah, it was scary, my friend. And I mean, we're talking about a kid that learned how to do mixing in his grandmother's basement
Yeah.
with an old 16-channel analog console and no 2-inch tape. And I had drum machine, I had keyboards and so on. And I took all the individual outputs, plugged them into this mixer, this 16-channel mixer, and emulated, separate tracks, so to speak, and started mixing that way. So I actually took what I learned in that basement and applied it to what I was doing at the Apollo.
And it
And
just went.
everything, it sort of worked out. I mean, and granted, Jam Master Jay, I mean, he had already been working in studios for a while, so he sort of knew what he wanted to do anyways. And the fact that I knew all the gear at the Apollo sort of helped, I helped him on his way to get what he really wanted to have done.
Well, that's the name of the game, isn't it? Just wherever you can provide value and be fill in the gaps that need to be filled. If you can do that, then that's where you become valuable to people, and they remember you, and they want you around because you're making the job a lot easier. And I think
Very, very true.
That's the key. It's like learning as much as you can, getting skilled in lots of different departments, if you will. And so when people ask you something, you can go, yep, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And make yourself indispensable. That's the key to it.
Yep. So that's exactly where it started.
Wow. So Onyx blew up.
Onyx blew up. Throw Your Guns in the Air blew up. I mixed that actually went gold, and then I mixed a few more records, and then there was one point where they wanted to leave the Apollo and go down to another studio named Soundtrack. So when they left the Apollo and I wasn't mixing any more records for them, I think I've done like six or seven of them, and they went down to Soundtrack, I said to myself, well, I think it's time for me to get another internship or try to work in another studio because I had already had some experience.
Yeah. Moving up in the bigger leagues.
Very, very, very little experience,
Yeah.
But I said to myself, hey, let me go down to this studio. So I did. Spoke to the owner, let him know where I worked, and of course I had Onyx on my resume, on my discography, which was one page, but hey.
Hey, we all start somewhere, buddy.
Right. So I spoke to the owner. His assistant brought me around, and they had 6 or 7 studios. Have never seen a place like this ever in my life. So I figured, hey, you want to be an intern? Great. No. I was an intern, but I was answering phones.
Well,
and cleaning toilets.
Yeah, man. Well, some of the greatest people started there, man. Listen, I don't consider myself a great of the industry, but I still clean toilets, and I still take out the rubbish. Keeps you centered. Well, I mean, it's the biggest podcast I've done to date in terms of viewership was with Mike Fraser up in Canada, who produced bands like AC/DC,
wow,
with Bon Jovi, just kind of up and comers, based in Vancouver, Aerosmith. And he did the same thing, man. He went into that joint and he became a janitor for a long period of time, and that's where he got to establish a relationship with Bob Rock, and and the rest, as I say, is history. But it everyone's got to start at some point, and
right.
and I think the cool thing about being the reception is that you are the focal point where people are coming in and out, and that's where you get to. And one thing in my time in New York I learned, man, which has served me right to this day, is about relationship building and just being good at, as you guys call the hang time. So even though you probably didn't get to hang out with people in the reception, but you got to meet a lot of people. I'm sure that would have been a great
Correct.
education. A great
Because
education.
I was the first place that they got to once they got off the elevator.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so you managed to do some of your hustle and networking, while you're answering phones and greeting people and helping people out.
Yes, as a matter of fact, as I was doing all the grunt work, I constantly kept talking to the manager. Hey, I really, really want to work here. I've mixed before. I have #1 record on the chart. He's like, nobody's asking for you. So, there was always something where people wanted to stop me from doing what I wanted to do. So he said, well, nobody's asking for you. So me, being the person that I am, I go, okay, I understand what you're talking about. So I went and I made some discographies that had Onyx at the top and other assistant gigs that I did. We're talking about Patti LaBelle was at the Apollo. I mean, there were like a lot of people that I worked with, and they had some name cred. And I started handing out my discography at the front desk.
Awesome.
So artists would walk in and I say, hey, how you doing? Welcome to Soundtrack. My name is Troy Hightower. I've worked on some records. If you ever need anybody, here's my discography. So that's really where it started.
And this is pre-internet days, wasn't it? There was no internet. There was no social
internet
media. None of that.
Nope, not at all. It was paper to hand.
And that's how it worked.
Yep. And yeah.
Do you actually? As much as I love social media, and it's been a tremendous tool for me, particularly when it comes to marketing and putting out content and just letting people know what's up. I do miss the old days though of of pressing the flesh and, like you said, paper to hand, and actually communicating with people face to face and getting a real connection going on. As opposed to just the convenience of email, and it's beautiful, and I wouldn't want to change anything, but
It's so interpersonal though.
But pardon me.
It's so interpersonal.
Yeah, and I think this is where even in this day and age, I still encourage people that to go even using the internet, just to go and create relationships with people. It's so important. I mean, because we now have access internationally to other people around the world. I mean, for me, I've told this story before, but for me to get in contact with someone like a Bob Clearmountain, who was my hero growing up, because he mixed most of the records I had in my collection. And so for me, my pilgrimage was to go to the power station and meet him and meet all the engineers that worked out of there, and be in New York, because New York to me was the Mecca, still is the Mecca as far as I'm concerned. But for me to get a hold of him, it was a letter that you sent off. You were lucky if it got there in 5 days. Now, depending on whether they got the letter on the day, when they got it, when they decided to open it, if and or when they decided to get back to you, and then by the time it got back, that could have been, at best, if the stars lined up for you, 2 weeks. Now, that same, hey, what's up? How are you? My name is blah, blah, blah. Love your work, is 2 clicks of a mouse and happens instantaneously. It's pretty crazy.
It definitely is faster for people to introduce themselves. Not saying that, the person's going to talk to you, but the introduction of like video conferencing like you have now, this has made it better for people, because now it's just not you talking over email, and you can see the person's emotion and and all the rest of that. So definitely is better today, for people that don't have the ability to get to a studio that's in Australia, or get to a studio that's in France or whatever. You can you can actually at least do a video call.
Yeah, totally. So I met you here. So
Yep.
so how did a hip hop producer engineer of your caliber decide to come out and do the long ass haul to Australia and work out here with an Australian when you had the best of the best just swimming around you and you almost could have your pick of the bunch? So what brought you out here? And tell us about your experience in Australia and how was it for you?
Well, before I say that, I know you say that I'm an engineer producer. I was really an engineer. I was really an engineer. Production wise, really didn't do a lot of production. I did a lot of help producing records because we were in the studio, but engineer was me. Okay, so
Yeah.
I got that straight. So,
Okay. And you did a lot of remixes too.
I've mixed remixes with like other producers. I mean, I haven't really been in the production end of it except for mixing the records.
Okay. So for example, when you were engineering
Mhm.
remixes for Janet Jackson, okay?
I was working with Rockwilder, who was working with Janet Jackson.
Okay. So
So see, I was the producer's engineer. It's like I work with producers. I work with Rockwilder. I've worked with Eric Sermon. Worked with Muggs
yeah,
from Cypress Hill.
yeah,
I mean, I've worked with Jam Master Jay.
yeah, yeah.
So I was always the engineer that producers wanted to meet, and because I worked with one producer, and records were put out that had my name on it back in the day, because now it's kind of different now too,
Mm.
you know. But the records that I had my names on, that's when other producers would say, "Hey, I like the way this record sounds. Go get that engineer." So that's really how I got my work, and that's why all my discography you'll see Janet Jackson's name and other major stars' names, because of the producers I work with.
Okay. All right. So tell us about your trip to Australia. What brought you out here, and what made you decide to take the long trip? Because it's a doozy, isn't it?
Well, not true. Australia really was my last. Australia was my last country that I went to through all the other countries I've gone to. I've I've been to Portugal a couple of times. I've been to France. I've been to where else? Portugal, France, London, and then after those countries and those records had come out, I got a call from Australia. I forgot what label that Perro was on,
Rubber
but
Records.
Rubber Records. I think it was an affiliation with, was it Universal?
I think so. I could be. I
All
definitely
right.
know. I definitely know it was
Um,
Rubber. Mm.
right. So I got a phone call that, hey, we want you to come out and we want you to mix this group's record. So that's really how that happened.
So, so did you have any? So did you have any communication with Peril before he came out here? Or was it all record company before you guys actually met in
Um,
person and started working?
wow. I honestly, I forget. I mean, and who knows? It was probably Peril because he's definitely a record listener,
Oh yeah.
and it was probably him who actually wanted me to mix his record.
I'm no doubt. I'm sure that he was a
You'd
driver.
have to ask him,
I'm sure.
because
I'm sure he was a driving force. But when did you two actually physically get to communicate? And when you came out here, or did you guys have some dialogue beforehand?
you know what, I have no idea. I really think it was when I actually went to Australia.
Yeah. So, what was your impression of Australia, and what made you decide to work with 1200 Techniques?
Well, I work with Australia, great area. Melbourne, where I stayed, where the studio was, I forget the name of the studio now. You
Sing
you
Sing.
would probably know Sing Sing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Australia was like, to me, a cleaner Greenwich Village in New York City.
Yeah.
So it was nice. It was hip. Everything was great. As far as 1200 techniques goes, I mean, what was the other thing you asked me?
No, I was just asking about,
About
what
1200?
what made you decide to work with the band? Did what was the appeal to you when you know?
Well, they asked, I mean, at that point, like I told you, I was an engineer for hire. So the record label hired me. I went out there and, I met Peril and met the rest of the group and started working with them. I mean, that was really how everything happened. The
Yeah,
record company was always the driving force because they were the ones that actually, pay for your flight, pay for your hotel stay, fed you, and all the rest of that business. So
a nice paid
that's how
working
I ended up working with them.
a nice paid working holiday. So, well, you certainly brought some real class to. I mean, I got to work on their first album, and I think Peril's one of those guys who is a true aficionado of hip hop. I don't think there's anyone that I know that what he doesn't know isn't worth knowing, if you know what I mean. And still to this day, still a student of it, and still going out and doing his nights. I've got nothing but respect for him for his dedication, because he was a writer back in the day, 14, 15, doing graph, and he's done all the elements of hip hop. He's dabbled in all of them and done extremely well at it, and still to this day.
More than me.
Yeah, well, I find that really interesting, because
Yeah, more than me.
because he puts you up on a pedestal, man. So
Well, again, he's, I was basically, you know, one of the engineers that created that sound back in the 90s.
yeah, true.
So people wanted to get that sound. They're like, hey, I want that guy right there.
Yeah. Well, did you work at Chung King as well? Did you have any time at Chung King back in the day?
I worked in every major studio in New York City. So yes, I did work at Chung King. I worked at Chung King. I worked at Electric Lady. I worked at Platinum Island. Where else did I work?
Record Plant.
There was a Record Plant. I didn't get a chance to work at Record Plant. I worked at Troy Germain studio. What is the name of it? I worked at Sony. I worked at the Hit Factory.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at a lot of different studios.
Yeah. One thing I'll always remember, man, is that how, every country and every place has its own vernacular, its own colloquialisms and own expressions and whatnot. And we got to exchange a few. I mean, I'd already spent a little time and been to New York and had I guess a reasonable handle of some of the New York speak. But one moment that will always remain with me, my friend, was when I entered into the mix room at Sing Sing, and you said, you asked me to do you something. Anyway, there was a request to accommodate some accommodation. I said, yeah. I said, yeah, sure, Troy, that'll be a piece of piss. And you swiveled in your chair and you looked at me and you said, what did you just say? I said, oh, piece of piss. And he said, how the heck can you get a piece of piss?
Right. True. It was definitely an experience working in Australia. I had to really learn the lingo, the lingo. So I didn't think that somebody was disrespecting me. So I mean, it was nice.
No, it was good. No, you. I think you fit in the place really, really well. I think Australia's a good match for you. We'd love to have you.
I would have. Trust me, if it wasn't for having a young baby girl, I mean, I would have loved to stay there, and I probably would have stayed there for at least a couple of years, like 2-3 years, like doing stuff out there. But I had women here at home.
One of the things that always I really respected about you, man, is that, as you know, music industry professionals trying to juggle family, work, particularly because the work lifestyle is not your typical 9 to 5 where you clock on, clock off. with your regular kind of 40-hour week and holidays and all that kind of stuff, especially when you're freelancing. But you're a guy that always managed to just rock it professionally, and yet you always managed to keep your home fires burning, you know, keep your family together, keep all that sort of stuff together. So what do you attribute that towards? Because to some people, man, it's their undoing. You know, the love for the craft is so great, and you need to be passionate, and you need to be driven, and you need to go above and beyond. But for a lot of people, without probably realizing it or even intending to, there's a breakdown of the family, or breakdown within themselves with, you know, I mean, I had my experience with substance abuse for many years, but you've always been a clean living dude. You've always just kept your shit together and really tight. So what do you attribute that towards? You know, how's it you managed to keep ticking the boxes and doing it well? I mean, not to say that you haven't had your ups and downs, but just overall,
No, right.
just keeping it tight. What do you attribute
Well, honestly, I attribute it to my wife,
Yeah.
because if it wasn't for her believing in what I was doing, and then also the money that came with it, you know, things would have broke down. I mean, she knew that I love to do what I was doing. I love to do audio, love to mix records, and she knew that, you know. So really, that's how everything has has stayed tight and close together, and like, you know, the family thing. I mean, there were many nights I wasn't home, and you know, and she wasn't happy about it, but at the same time, because it made me happy, she went with it. So she was really the driving force,
Yeah. Well, shout out to
keeping us
Chris.
together.
Well, shout out to Christine, and I think also to the wives and partners of those who, you know, have audio professionals in their life, and particularly the ones that have to travel and work ridiculous hours. Because it's not an easy path to take. You know, giving support to people like that. I know it was really hard on my ex-wife, but she had to put up with a lot of bullshit with me, man.
Well, this wife I have here for 37 years. I mean, 27 on paper, 10 as friends. I mean, you know, she's put up with a lot of crap, and you know, that's another conversation
Yeah.
on the on the on the psychiatrist's couch.
Yeah. So these days, you've been doing some TV work, because you know, one thing that's been cool is that people got to learn how to reinvent themselves, because nothing stays the same forever, as we all know. You know, I've been going through
And
my own reinvention of my own. So, so how did TV come about for you, and where you're at these days, and what sort of things you're working on?
well, TV came about for me when those buildings fell down in New York City,
Right.
and that was September 2001.
Correct.
That's when everything changed.
Mm.
The business in New York changed. As a matter of fact, the business in New York was no business, because
Yeah.
nobody wanted to come to Times Square, and everybody was down south, Atlanta, or in California. And because I had a family, you know, I had to grit and bear it. So you know, while doing music, mixing music for people, I met a guy that was working at a local TV studio. And I said, "Hey, I'll mix this record for you for nothing," because of course I'm trying to reinvent myself. The guy didn't know it, but you know, I said, "Hey, I'm trying to get into TV, and you know, could you get me in?" And he basically, you know, said, "Hey, well, you know, you come down on like a certain day, and I'll show you the ropes." So that's what I did for 80 hours for free, until a director that has worked with me multiple times said, "Hey, listen, I'll see you tomorrow," thinking that I had already been working there already.
Right.
That's how I got into the TV business, because you know, because of those buildings that fell down, I got into TV, and that TV job turned into other TV jobs.
So doing audio and TV, I imagine that all the skills that you learned making records translated pretty well across, or was it or was there a case of having to relearn new stuff or new approach or new ways? Because I haven't worked in TV myself, but
Well, the guy that I was working with, I was mixing his record. He said to me, "Okay, this is one thing I have to tell you." He goes, "Everything that you did as far as like us being in the studio and like playing records back over and over again 100 times and 200 times and then getting it right." He said to me, as as long as people can hear what the person is talking about, and the picture, and basically the picture looks halfway decent, they could care less about really that there might be a little bit too much low end in like a voice or something like that. All of that audio foul business was like thrown out the window. He goes, as long as they can be heard, that's all that matters. So it it was different in the sense that you had to think on your feet. You were dealing with live situations, and whatever came in, you had to quickly fix it. So that was the difference between being in the studio and doing TV. And it's the same way to this day.
yeah, no safety net, no Apple
Mm.
or Command Z undo. It's just,
Nope.
yeah,
Nope.
that's
It's
it.
sort of like doing live sound,
Yeah,
like at the club every night. It's always something different. You know, you deal with what you're given when they give it to you.
yeah. That's the one thing I've had a lot of respect for live sound guys, particularly the ones that have to go from venue to venue to venue. There may be some familiarity with the rig they're working on or parts of the kit that they're working on, but to go into a room
But the
where you
space
got,
is different.
yeah, and the acoustics, and it's usually in flux because sound check and how things sound with an empty stadium and then a full stadium or room is different. It's this,
Correct.
the goalposts are constantly moving. And so, it's all right for guys like myself who come into this space almost daily, knowing the room and being familiar with it. But when you flip that round, I don't think I could do it. I really don't.
No,
So
listen, you probably could if you had to.
maybe if my back was to the wall, but
Uh,
but to do it well,
yeah.
but to do it well though, because again, you got one crack, at it, Troy. There's no revision. There's no like, hey, listen,
Dude,
can you
there's
come?
been many gigs that I screwed up, my friend. I screwed up, and the reason why everything worked out well was because of what you alluded to earlier, the hang time.
Yeah. So how'd the hang time help you in those situations?
Well, I just basically knew how to manipulate a situation. I mean, really, that that's that's what it came down to, Jack.
Yeah.
You know, somebody was upset. I knew how to like bring them. I knew how to bring them back from off the ledge.
Yeah. Rick Essig, my main mastering mentor, who taught me how to cut lacquers at Frankfurt Wayne, said to me that I've said this many times, but I love it. 80% of this job, he says, bullshit. So it's,
Yes, sir.
people gotta like you. They gotta trust you. They gotta feel like you're invested in them and you're on their team and you're a surrogate member of their band. And when they feel that you're all in, um, they can allow a few little misgivings in terms of if you can't
Yeah,
listen up to this frequency, or you're not the most technically whatever, so long as you can produce the goods. And they love being in, because let's face it, man, in studio spaces are confined spaces, and particularly when we're talking tracking and mix sessions, 10, 8, 12, 14-hour days,
hmm
you gotta be comfortable and be in a good space with the people you're working with. They gotta want to be in the
correct,
room with you, yeah. And so
correct.
you can be I've seen a lot of great engineers who done awesome and number one on the charts here and there, but they were just complete utter shitheads. And people were around them merely because of the fact that they felt there was this gold dust rubbing off on them because we want a piece of that guy because he's number one on Billboard this week, or he's the darling of the scene. But these things are
It's
transitory.
no, it's true though. I mean, most of my most of the music that I mixed was because I was on the hot album. or or I mix something on a hot label. I mean, that's a lot of it was word of mouth, Jack.
Yeah.
So I do understand that, and then on top of that, like I said, I had the gift of gab.
Yeah.
That's really what it came down to, and that
Yeah.
worked for a while until until those damn buildings fell out, Jack.
Yeah, well, you still had to have some gift because you had to reinvent yourself. You have to find a way to, and you did. Like you said, you worked your way into television. You've done it
Yep,
again now with live mixing. So tell us about what's
correct.
happening. So tell us now about how you segued into that and what's going on with live mixing and what you're doing at the moment. And
All right. Well, I mean, besides trying to get into TV, I still like mixing. And there came a point where the equipment got smaller and got better,
yeah,
and everybody could afford it. Because
correct.
when everything became computer based, as long as you had a fast computer, you know, any company like Pro Tools or like Nuendo or Logic,
Logic, yeah, yeah,
they have the software to sell you, so everybody became to speak. They became an engineer. Whether they were good or not, they could do it without having to worry about punching the clock and paying studio costs.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
because of that, I said, hey, you know what? I have to get into something else, that I can learn that not everybody is into. You just can't get a computer. So that's where the whole live sound thing came about. And, I tried to work with other live sound people, and it was a close knit group where I used to live. And the only way for me to actually do live sound was for me to buy the equipment. And that's basically what I did. I was making pretty good money mixing records, but I said, hey, I got this money saved. Let me buy this equipment. So that's how I started.
Well, I remember once when a few years ago you were working on an act in Portugal, and we were talking about doing some mastering, and you said, "Jack, let me show you
You're
my."
talking
He
about
said,
Boston
you're,
AC.
you,
Yeah,
thank you for correcting me there, but
yeah.
he said, "Jack, let me show you my studio," and and right behind you on the kitchen table was your interface and your cans and you were making some really good shit from that, and you were very proud of that. You were like, "Hey, man, this is where I came from, but this is where it's at. This is what we're doing," and
Right.
you were putting out great output from there. But it was true. It was this whole, again, there's this whole adage I tell kids: the people. It's not about having the most resources. It's about being the most resourceful. Yeah. So
Eh,
you already had skills, but you were able to take something that on the surface looked humble, but yet what you squeezed out of that was really quite incredible.
I mean, Jack, just like in the stuff that you do, your your business, how you get paid, is with what's on the side of your head, is
Yep.
your ears.
Yeah.
Your ear, your ears are what gets you paid, Jack.
They're the money makers.
I mean, you don't have to be beautiful to master.
No, I'm living proof.
So I mean, hey, listen, no matter what it is, because see, I was fortunate because I worked in studios. I knew what an SSL sounded like. I knew what a Neve console sounded like. I
Yeah.
knew what a 480L reverb sounded like. So, you know, I had already, my ears have already heard a lot of this analog gear. I knew what stuff sounded like when it was on tape, so basically what I was doing at my kitchen table was emulating everything that I've heard throughout the years and applying it to this computer and this digital platform.
Mm.
So I think that was, all that experience doing that made me just as good because of my ears doing something on a computer.
One of my great friend, Bob St. John, who I've had on the podcast a couple of times now, would say, and he made a really good point, which is the way he would make digital sound analog was, I mean, yes, digital has come a long way in terms of how it emulates the old gear. Forget about the fact whether it's exactly the same or not. That's but he would say the way he would do that is by actually treating the plugins like they were analog boxes. So he would treat it no differently. And so in terms of the gain staging, in terms of what the dials did, it didn't matter to him that it was a plugin, So he just adopted the same workflow principles from analog, only replacing those boxes with the plugins. And lo and behold, he still managed to create what to most listeners was almost indistinguishable as analog. Even though it was all digital in the box.
Because he knew what it sounded like. See, that's where you have a leg up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so that's how we got it all done. Now, listen, I want to ask you: can we just digress into some culinary stuff for a moment?
Man, okay, Jack. Go ahead, Jack. What's up? I'm gonna have to give my wife for this one. What's up?
No. So soul food. Tell me and others who we've heard about soul food. We've seen it on the Blues Brothers movie. Give us a rundown. What is soul food? What constitutes soul food? And does Christina make soul food for you?
My wife is the ish. She can make just about anything. Okay, she's a little short Irish girl. She can make just about anything. And a lot of it too was, my grandmother used to. I lived with my grandmother for a while. Once we got married, and of course, if you're looking to make the things that your husband likes, you take some pointers. So I mean, she looked at a lot of stuff. Now you're asking me about soul food.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I am not a soul food aficionado like Patti LaBelle and other people like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do like the food. I'm not really sure what you're trying to have me tell you about soul food.
So okay, so if I went to a place that dished up soul food, what are the sort of things that I'd be eating? Would it be grits? Would it be black-eyed peas? Would it be rice? Would it be what could I expect to eat if I'm being served up soul food?
All the above that you just said. Probably some good fried chicken, See, Jack, you put me on a spot, man. I mean, listen, I'm a nerd when it comes to everything. Okay.
Yeah.
I might be a brother, but as far as that kind of stuff, I mean, you ask me to mix a record, Jack, I know exactly what to do. You asked me about soul food, even though I did go to culinary school.
Yeah.
I went to culinary school, and it was a French American cuisine school.
Right. Okay.
They didn't even make soul food.
Yeah.
So I mean, so really, you put me on the spot, Jack. But it's okay. I forgive you, though.
No, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot, but I think you've cleared up a little bit of what is. But the other thing, well, I don't know much about soul food, but the one thing I did experience in America was for when I was served by African Americans, when they were cooked for me, there was so much love that went into their cooking. There was so maybe we could say there's a lot of soul that goes into the food. It's
okay.
That's one of the things I kind of think about in that respect.
I mean, listen, Jack. Talking. My grandmother made chitlins. My grandmother made, collard greens. I mean, cornbread. I mean, there were staples. So for black-eyed peas, which really I never really liked, and I tell you something funny. I didn't like them when I was a kid because I thought they were looking at me when I was a kid. Okay, so that's why I never liked them, even though later on in life, I mean, they tasted great, Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they call soul food only because,
marketing,
or that's all they had to eat. I mean, that's like another discussion. I mean, they were the scraps that they got when they were early on, working for somebody else, and you work for the house and they gave you the scraps. So that's where all the pig feet stuff came from, and like chitterlings and all the rest of that business was because that's what you had to deal with. So why not make it taste good?
Yeah, totally. Again, being resourceful, not just having resources. Actually, there's well, over here in Australia, there's a few restaurants now that are opening up that, see, I like offal, liver, kidneys, heart, all that shit. I'm down with that. Tripe, you name it, when it's done well. And so
Me?
now,
Nah.
nah.
I'm too Americanized.
What about the food in Australia? Was there anything here that you ate that stood out for you, or that was different that you hadn't had before, that kind of made you go, ooh, or yum?
Honestly, my friend, I
Yeah.
had no time to eat and like go places or whatever. I was working. You know me, dude. The only thing I said to is when you brought a nice bottle of Shiraz
Yes.
wine to the
Yes.
studio.
Yep.
Wine wise, that's what I had. I had wine more than I liked the food. So
You still like a red?
so Shiraz, my
You still like the crack of the odd bottle every now and again?
Yep. I do crack a bottle when I can, but right now I'm working.
Yeah, I know.
I'm working everywhere. You know what I'm saying? But
Now
it all depends on
I never saw you drink a lot, but when I did, it was always very late. It was always down tools. But then you guys are shut down. That's the only time I did see you drink, and you were just a good social. I mean, I don't drink that much myself, but we had a nice social drink. I look forward to the day when we can do that again.
I was never drunk. I mean,
no,
I mean, I was definitely a social drinker.
I'd
without a doubt.
I'd never seen you drunk. You were just no. It was just a good social lubricant, and it was just always a good laugh.
Social lubricant. I like the way you said that. That's nice. That's nice.
Yeah. Troy Hightower, I got to get out of here. I got my next guys banging on the door, but we finally got there.
Yes, we actually got through it.
And it was just no different to the usual banter that we go on when we do chat with each other. So it's just another, not that we need an excuse to catch up, man, but it was just nice to be able to record the conversation and keep it for posterity. And hopefully some young kids who watch it may get some inspiration, because that's what this podcast is all about, my friend. It's about having engaging conversations with professionals who share their stories, and hopefully there's some nugget in there that some kid will pick up on and run with, and maybe, who knows, change the trajectory of their existence.
Yes, don't let anybody ever tell you that you can't do anything. If you want to do it, go out and do it.
Yeah. And I think consistency, yeah? Would you agree? It's just being consistent and just keep hammering away. It's a numbers game. I think you throw enough shit to the wall, something's got to stick eventually.
Correct. Definitely, Jack.
Yeah, just keep working.
My friend, it was nice talking to you, bro.
Always, man. Love you, Troy. You're awesome.
All right.
Give our love to Christina. I hope you enjoy your dinner tonight. And thank you very much for your time. It was very much appreciated, Troy.
You're welcome, Jack.
All right, bud. Take care. Love you. And I'll talk to you soon.